So we're going to treat number 2 similar to number 1, and what I'm going to start by doing is turning my pen on. And then I'm just going to keep that cosine squared x right where it is, and I'm going to move that 1 over and set it equal to 0. Okay, now again, you want to kind of be thinking that this is sort of like x squared minus 1 equals 0, and I'm going to do dots. So I'm going to have cosine x plus 1, and then I would have a cosine x minus 1. Take each of those factors, do your t-chart. On the left-hand side here, I'm going to get cosine x equals negative 1, and on the right-hand side, I'm going to get cosine x equals positive 1. So then you're going to look at your unit circle, and remember cosine is the x value. And so for both of those, actually, we're looking for x values. And let me just finish this because I can't do things at once. And we're looking for where the x value is on the left-hand side here. We're looking for where the x value is negative 1, which would be over here. So then we know the degree measure over there is 180. And I'm going to put that in radians, and I know that that is pi. So there's my answer there. Now over here, we want a value of x that's a positive 1, which would be right here. And remember, you have two angle measures here. You have 0 and you have 360. So just be careful, go back, and you want to look at the directions, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. And the directions do not include 2 pi, so we cannot include 360. So then my only answer, whoops, there I go thinking that I have my pen on again. My only answer then is going to be x equals 0 pi. And again, 360 does work. 2 pi, that does work, but it's not in the domain that's given. All right, so let's take a peek at number 6. So for number 6, you have a lead coefficient that's not a 1. So remember, we would do rainbow. And you're going to ask yourself what multiplies to a positive 2 and adds to a positive 3. So remember, when we do rainbow, we always bring down the first term, and we also bring down the last term. And then we ask what multiplies to 2. Well, that would be a 2, right? And a 1. But we need to add to a positive 3, so both of those guys would be positive, and those do multiply to a positive 2. So once you've done your rainbow, you group your first two terms together and your second two terms together, and we're going to take out GCFs. So in the first grouping, I see that they both have a 2 and they both have a cosine. And then when I take that out, I am left with cosine x plus 1. Don't forget the 1, okay? Something divided by itself is always a 1. Now in that second grouping, I don't really see anything else in common besides a 1, so I'm just going to pull that 1 out, and that's going to give me cosine x plus 1. Okay, now remember, when you're doing rainbow, you know that you're doing it right when you get the same thing in both parentheses, which I do. Let me just make that look like a plus. All right, so we take the GCFs. They get grouped together in one set of parentheses, and then those repeat guys, they go together in the other. T-chart, set equal to 0. And on the left here, I end up with cosine x equals negative 1/2. And on the right-hand side, I have cosine x equals negative 1. Now, I'm just going to do this one on the right-hand side because we just did that. And the x value corresponds with cosine, and we're looking for where it's negative 1, so that would be at 180, which is pi. All right, now over here on the left, an angle whose cosine is 1/2, I understand the negative is there, but remember the negative just determines the quadrant, so I'm going to ignore that for a second. And so I know that that angle that has a cosine of, that's 1/2 would be 60 degrees, right? Which I know is pi over 3. There's my reference angle. But now remember, this determines the quadrant. And since the cosine is negative, think about where cosine is negative, and that would be in the second and the third. So I have a second quadrant answer and a third quadrant answer. So in the second quadrant, we do 180 minus 60, which is 120. And in the third quadrant, we do 180 plus 60, which is 240. Okay, now we're just going to convert these to radians. All right, now remember, these are both going to be some multiple of pi over 3. Okay, and now we ask ourselves, what do I multiply 60 by to get to 120? And that's 2. So this is 2 pi over 3. Okay, and then we ask ourselves, what do we multiply 60 by to get to 240? And that's 4. So that gives us 4 pi over 3. And there's our 2 answers over there. So we have 3 answers altogether. All right, so let's look at number 8. Please make sure that you are taking notes in your packet for all of this. Okay, so I am going to take these guys and I'm going to move them over to the x squared side so I can set it equal to 0 and so that I can factor. So I've got 2 sine squared x. That's going to turn that into a minus sine x and a minus 3 and set that equal to 0. All right, so I see again that I've got a lead coefficient that's not a 1. So I'm going to rainbow. And in this case, I'm going to multiply to get negative 6. And I want to add to get a negative 1. Sorry about that. So let's bring down the first term. Bring down the last term. And what multiplies to negative 6 and adds to negative 1? I would say a positive 2. And a negative 3. So we're going to group the first two, group the second. Let's take a 2 sine x out of that first grouping, which leaves you with sine x plus 1. And out of the second grouping, let's take out a negative 3, which leaves you with sine x plus 1. Okay. So let's take the GCFs and put them together. And let's take the repeats and put them together. All right, T-chart, and let's solve. So on the right-hand side here, I have sine x equals negative 1. So now remember, sine goes with your y value. So if you look at this, I'm not going to bother with the other ones because they don't have y values that are a negative 1. They're zeros. You can see that the y value that's negative 1 is at 270. So your answer on the right-hand side here is going to be 270. And I'm going to cut to the chase and make that 3 pi over 2. Right, now on the other side here, if I get the sine x by itself, I get 3 halves. That's 1 1/2. Now, I know that you were not allowed to use your calculator and we're not letting you up to this point, but if you could take your calculator, even if you just have your Chromebook, take out your calculator. Now remember, when you're trying to figure out the angle measure and you're putting this in the calculator and you're looking for the angle measure, you actually hit the second button, then sine. So you'll hit second sine 3 halves. Okay, do that in your calculator. Second sine 3 halves. Pause me if you have to. You should get error. And that's not wrong. It is actually correct. Here's the deal. When you have sine or cosine, you can never have a sine or a cosine that's bigger than 1. And this is bigger than 1. Okay? Likewise, not that we have that in this particular example, but if I had something like this, if I did, this is not what I have, but if I did, now that's not bigger than 1, but it's less than negative 1. So whenever you have something that's over a positive 1 or under a negative 1, you're going to get error in your calculator. So you know what? It's a wonderful thing because it just made your life really easy. All you do is just go like this. I want you to write error so that I know that you know that it doesn't work out. I don't want you to erase anything, just simply put a line through it just like I did. So your only answer is 3 pi over 2. Okay? All right, guys, so what I want you to do for the remainder of the period, your homework is to finish the rest of page 1 and 2. Actually, that's the rest of your classwork. I'll be checking that though. And then on Monday, don't tell Mr. Nisi. No, I did tell her actually. On Monday, your remote work is supposed to be to do page 3. I'm going to tell you, I'm not teaching. She did teach it to some of her classes, I think. But if you quick flip to page 3, you are going to cross off 16, 17, and 18. Okay, it's not necessary for you guys to know. So you got some light remote work on Monday. You only are responsible to do 13, 14, and 15. Okay, so classwork homework right now and for the weekend is pages 1 and 2, whatever you didn't finish. Monday's remote work is just page 3. You're going to cross off 16, 17, and 18. Okay? Bye.